Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today we'll be doing part 2 of the MLBB guide for noobs. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll put a link at the top right hand corner of this video, so please check that out. This second part of the video will actually talk about the different roles within a team, and hopefully this will help all you beginners out there have a better idea of what you should be doing in your different roles. Now without further ado, let's get into the video. So in every single MLBB game, there are 5 players on each team and each player plays a different role. So firstly, we'll be talking about the side lanes, the first role being the EXP lane. The EXP lane is named as such because of the fact that it provides the most EXP in the early game. So the EXP lane is very good for heroes who are very skill reliant, because the faster that they level up, the faster they gain their skills and they're able to contribute to the team faster. As long as you are playing the roles that are within the lanes, always try to clear your minions, clear your waves as fast as possible. Last hitting the minions will actually give you extra gold or extra experience depending on the lane that you are in, so try to do that as much as you can. For the EXP lane, the special thing is that your final creep, that little cannon guy, actually carries extra EXP. So you can differentiate him from the other side's lane is that the fact that he's carrying scrolls. If you clear this minion, you'll actually get more EXP than you would in any other lane. So you can see that you get more EXP from the animation. There's actually an EXP up when you clear the minion. So like every good side laner, you only have one job in the early game, and basically that is to push your lane and try to get your first tower as fast as you can. As I've mentioned in the previous beginner video, if you actually attack your tower in the early game in the first 5 minutes, you get bonus gold from it. So as a side laner, you should always try to do that, unless the enemy is zoning you out from this tower or the enemy can actually kill you once you are inside this tower. Remember that if you fight an enemy when you're under his tower, you will get attacked by the tower. Once again, I'm going to repeat that the key objective for a side laner, whether or not you're an EXP laner or a gold laner, is basically to take down the first tower as fast as you can. The reason is so that you can try to leave your lane after that, so you can gank other lanes or help push other lanes and engage in team fights more frequently because of the fact that you've already taken down one tower. So by usual estimates, the time that you get your level 4 in the EXP lane is actually when you are clearing your third minion wave, assuming that you gain the maximum amount of experience and gold from the different minion waves. This is estimated to be about 1 minute and 40 seconds into the game. Side laners are very busy people. They not only have to clear their lane and to take the tower, they also have to help the hyper focus on objectives and also have to help the hyper gank when it's the right time to do so. Sometimes you can start the objective so that your hyper can just come over and secure the objective once he is done with whatever task he is doing, so that it can reduce the amount of time that people know that you are taking the objective. Once he is here to take the objective, you can try to secure the perimeter. So for beginners, there are various heroes that I would recommend for the EXP lane. My considerations are the ease to use these heroes as well as their current position in the meta. Balmon is one of the first heroes that I would recommend because he's very easy and he's one of the first heroes that all beginners will actually get. He's tanky and he's able to sustain himself and prove himself in a team fight, so he's definitely good for the current meta. Esmeralda is the next hero because she has very simple mechanics and she's very tanky, so she's able to go into team fights and definitely sustain herself at late game, so beginners will use her very well. Xbox is the last hero that I would recommend for the EXP lane for beginners. His skills are very easy to use and he's very tanky if you build him with the right items. In Epic and above, he's probably banned quite often because he's difficult to deal with, but if you're playing in the lower ranks, you should have no problem choosing him and using him. Next up in the roles, we have the gold laner. Basically in the gold lane, heroes are able to gain more gold so that they can get their items earlier. So this is very useful for heroes that actually rely on items in order to deal more damage. Generally, this refers to the marksmen who are the core damage dealers in the late game, so it allows them to actually get their equipment earlier and be a bit more menacing in the early game. Although in the current meta, sometimes people pick tanky fighters because they don't want the game to drag until a point where a marksman gets solidly fed and can actually destroy the entire enemy team. And a tanky fighter in the gold lane will actually prevent that because it can stop the marksman from farming properly. So once again, as a gold laner, you will want to actually clear the wave as fast as possible and try to maximize the last hits on all the minions. The last minion in the wave, the cannon guy, will actually have gold inside his little pouch to show you that this is the gold lane and you are farming as much gold as you can. Whether or not you're in the EXP lane or the gold lane, remember that you're still a side laner and your job is to basically clear the minion wave and take down the first tower as quickly as you can. Like I said in the previous video, one issue that I see with many beginners is that they try to take the jungle or they try to take the crab because they think that is the most efficient way for them to farm gold, and that is not the case. Especially if you're a marksman, your early game damage is not very good and taking jungle is not very smart for you because you'll take a very long time to clear them when you don't have retribution on you. So always try to stay at your tower and take the bonus gold that you can from the enemy tower. Remember, that's why they designed the mechanics so that you will stay in your lane and take the bonus gold. As always, as the side laner, you should always try to help gank and you should always try to help to take objectives such as the turtle and the lord. The choice of gold laner will actually affect a team if the game goes into the late game phase. Basically, if you drag it maybe more than 12 to 13 minutes, even close to 15 minutes, anything longer than that, your gold lane choice will have made all the difference in the late game. So here I'll recommend some gold laners that will make a difference. Either you have early game dominance or late game dominance. So first up, for the early game heroes, Clint is actually a very good choice because his early game damage with his first skill as well as his passive actually is quite deadly. His mechanics are also quite simple and I think beginners will actually find him very easy to pick up. And Clint can actually scale very well into the late game, so I will also definitely recommend him if you want to make sure that you are able to impact the game from early to late game. Next up on the list is Brody. Brody is also a very simple hero to use. His skills, basically you just need to make sure that you hit them, ensure that your marks hit, and then you use your ulti so they can kill everybody in vicinity. He is a very powerful early game hero, although his damage might die out a little bit later into the game if you try to build him defensively, so do take note of that. Lastly, for the early game dominance, Saber is a very good choice because he's easy to use and he's also a hero that many of the beginners will actually get. Once Saber hits his level 4, he is generally able to burst down any gold lane marksman or assassin that is camping there. But once again, his damage dies off a little bit into the late game, especially after enemies build defense items to counter him, so do take note if that is one hero that you want to try. For the late game dominance, I would recommend Nathan as a hero to use. With Nathan, actually mid-game you already start to hurt a lot. In the late game he is just pure damage and it's very difficult to avoid him because his attacks are so fast. And since he's very reliant on his basic attacks, you can actually just spam your basic attack, which makes his mechanics very easy to understand. If you're playing against a Nathan in the late game, you definitely have to focus on him because he will be the one that can actually deal the savage to your entire team. The next hero that I would recommend for the late game in the gold lane is actually Alice. Some beginners might not know this, but Alice is a very potent hero in the meta right now. Once she gets her items, she is very difficult to kill and very difficult to deal with. Her mechanics are also quite simple to understand and you just need to know that her power spike is the 50 stacks that she needs to get from collecting all the blood orbs. Once you do that, you're able to dominate with Alice no matter against what hero. Next up, let's talk about the mid lane. Mid lane is usually where mages go to thrive. This is because of the fact that they don't really need equipment in order to be very scary. With their skills, and generally most mages have pretty good mobility, they can actually move around the map and gank properly with the rest of their team. So do remember that mid laners do have a lane that they need to protect, which is the mid lane basically, so they also still need to clear the waves as per normal and try to push the tower as much as they can. However, they are also more responsible because of the fact that they need to gank in the early game with the tank or with the hyper, or even support the tank and hyper in trying to get their farm as fast as possible. There are no special EXP or gold for the mid laners because they don't really need those. So once you clear your waves, generally you always want to try to help your team try to take the objectives such as the Little Wanderer. If not, after that you can try to gank with the rest of your team. So a mage and a tank moving in tandem will actually help the team very much because they can actually try to secure kills for the side laners and even for the hyper. Remember to always let your tank be the one to initiate, and you as a mage, you should always try to be the damage dealer. In the early game, mages are also still quite painful because they don't really need items to be very deadly. Don't be afraid to use your skills and your spells so that you can gain an early advantage for your team, because that's basically the main idea of why you are chosen to gank in the early game. So for mages, there are actually many different types of mages that are quite easy to use. So here I'll recommend some that are useful for beginners. Eve is a very good hero to choose because of the fact that her skills are quite easy to understand. Basically, she has one burst and one little bar-like thing that you can use to slow the enemies and damage them, and you got one chessboard that you can play chess on. However, with these simple mechanics, Eve is very useful in zoning out enemies and to actually even deal burst damage to the enemies and kill them quite fast. Nana is the next mage on the list, and basically I think a lot of beginners will use Nana very well because she's free and she is very easy to use. Basically, you just throw a Molina out there and then try to use your boomerang and your ulti to try to kill enemies. These crowd control skills are very important in the current meta, and Nana can definitely be one of the best mages to use, and it's also so simple to use, so beginners will definitely like her very much. Next up is Luo Yi. Basically, she is quite easy to understand. Her passive procs when you use her skills in different colors, and she's also quite mobile with her ultimate, so you can actually move around the map with her ultimate. Honestly, just build Luo Yi with burst damage and you are able to dominate, especially in team fights where you can push all your enemies together and make them die together. Last but not least, I think is a crowd favorite is basically Veil. Veil is a very easy to understand hero. His skills are knock up and he can deal massive damage with his ultimate and even his first skill. So he's very easy to use, and I mean, he looks cool, has great abs, so why not? So next up on the list is the role that many beginners forget. It's basically the tank or the support. Generally, this role is not preferred by beginners because of the fact that they get the least kills and the least assists, but they are also one of the most important roles in the entire team. Tanks are generally the people that actually initiate team fights. They enter the fights and soak up all the damage and the skills from the enemy team so that their own team can come in and deal damage and destroy the enemy team. Support heroes are generally the same, but they might be a bit more different in their utility. They are not there to soak up damage. They might be there, for example, to heal heroes or to stun heroes, for example. So what differentiates the tank and support from the other units within the game is basically they are the ones that buy the roam item. Buying the roaming item means you will no longer gain gold and EXP when you're farming minions or creeps with your teammates. Basically, all this gold and EXP will go to them. This is key when you're trying to help your hyper farm because all you want to do is basically help them gain as much gold and EXP as they can. Tanks don't really need the equipment in order to be very annoying. Basically, we just need our skills to try to be annoying. So tanks have two things that they can do in the early game. Basically, they can try to delay the enemy hyper in getting their farm, which is what I did with the Franco. Or I can try to help my teammates get their jungle creeps or their minions faster. Tanks and supports can also try to initiate objectives because they are the ones that can actually soak up the most damage. So being the ones who soak up the damage from the objectives such as the turtle or the lord is very important. And instead of just focusing on the objective, sometimes you will also need to provide vision. So basically you want to zone out the enemies by going to the grass and then providing an ambush or basically just a barrier around the objective that you're trying to secure. Here you can see that I actually provided vision with Popo by placing his traps around, so that is one of the other things that a tank can do depending on the tank's skills. My dog also continues to soak up the damage from the turtle, and here you can see an enemy try to invade and my job is basically to chase him away because I am tank. So tanks and supports are definitely the least favorite of beginners because they don't get kills and assists like I said just now. But here are some tanks and supports that might actually interest you if you're a beginner, and you can probably still get kills and assists because of the damage or the skills that these tanks actually provide. So I will recommend also both tanks and supports so that you can decide what kind of support you want to be within this game. First on the list is the king of beginner tanks, Tigreal. So all beginners will get Tigreal and you'll probably learn to use him to a certain extent at one point or another. His skills are so simple to use. Basically, you just need to whack the floor, or you need to push someone, or you need to suck them all towards you so that your team can actually deal their skills on the entire enemy team. So Tigreal is basically a very easy to use tank, and that's why he's one of the beginner tanks, so you can definitely use him in the team if you want to. He's also currently in the meta because of the fact that his CC skills are quite strong and he can also invade in the early game, which is quite a pain, especially if you're playing against other beginners. The next tank you can consider using is Hylos. Hylos is a very painful early game hero because he is able to deal so much damage with his second skill. His skills are also easy to understand. He has a stun, and his ultimate creates a pathway where his team can actually use to escape or to go towards enemies when they need to. Last but not least, in the tank genre, I would recommend Jawhead. Some of you might ask, why use Jawhead since he's not really a tank, he's more of a fighter? But actually Jawhead is a very good tank to use, especially if you build him with defense items. He can become quite sturdy and still deal enough damage. What's more, he's annoying as hell because he can throw you into the air, he can stun you with his ultimate, he can still deal massive amounts of damage with his first skill. For support heroes, instead of using tanks, you can use the holy quartet of Florin, Angela, Estes, or Rafaela. These 4 heroes basically support their team in terms of healing, as well as in other ways such as crowd control or in damage. Very easy to learn and very easy to use, so I would definitely recommend them if you're looking for a support that is not so initiative heavy. The last role that we have to talk about is definitely the jungle or the hyper role. This is usually the beginner's favorite role because they get to go into the jungle and they get the most kills and assists because they roam around the map trying to do that. But it's important to note that as a jungler, that is not your main objective. Your ganking and your killing is basically a way so that your team can actually push the towers much easier, and your role is to also gain objectives so that it can help your team advance as fast as possible. Early in the game, you should be focused on taking the various jungle monsters such as the buffs and the different jungle creeps. There is a certain way of moving around the jungle so that you can maximize your efficiency. Personally, I do this. This is just a hypothetical situation. Usually I start with the red buff before I take the Little Wanderer, before rotating down to take Ricky, and then going to the blue buff before taking the Skilled Lizard and the Crab. Usually once I do this, I'm level 3, and then I'll either go to the enemy's jungle and try to steal their little Kramer, or take my Kramer on my other side to try to get to level 4, depending on where the turtle is. But how you take the jungle really depends on you. You should always decide what is the most comfortable rotation for yourself and decide based on the objective's position. Remember that as the jungler, your job is basically to take objectives, so always try to take the objectives such as the turtle and the lord, because these are the best ways for your team to actually farm and get a goal lead over the entire enemy team. And always be the one to use your retribution so that you can try to secure the objective. Don't save your retribution for anything else such as buffs or anything. The reason why you are the jungler is because you have retribution, so use that to your advantage. I would also like to say, if you're not the jungler, don't take the creeps. So there are many heroes that are actually useful for jungling, but the best ones are usually quite difficult to use. Here are some easy ones that I would recommend for beginners. Barats is one of the most efficient junglers in the current meta, and he is very easy to use. His skills are easy to understand, and he's basically very tanky the moment once you get him big. Beginners that like to rush into team fights will actually find Barats a very useful hero because he can actually soak up all that damage and still deal out insane damage on his own. Once again, like Xborg, in Epic and higher, Barats is usually banned at the moment. I would definitely recommend that you use him if you're in the lower ranks, of course. The next 2 heroes to use as jungler that I would recommend are Yi Sun-shin and Roger. I would say that these 2 are not the easiest heroes to use as hyper, but they are one of the best, and their mechanics are not that difficult to understand. I think the key message that I can give about these 2 heroes is that they are not difficult to use, but they are difficult to use well. If you want to use them in rank, you probably have to train up with them a little bit more in Classic before trying to use them as the jungler so that you'll be more efficient when you're using them. And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like and subscribe and click the notification bell, and join my Discord if you want to talk to other people about Mobile Legends.